views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says that everyone in the United States has the right to practice his or her own religion, or no religion at all. But in recent years, some would argue that freedom of religion has been deeply under attack. On this edition of Perspectives, we'll discuss the state of religious freedom in America. Is it at stake? Is popular culture having its way, slowly stripping away the rights of people of faith? Are there policies that are currently hindering the free exercise of religion? That and more coming up on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind? Let 'em know. Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, just speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. We thank you for joining us. As always, you can join Perspectives every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67. We encourage you also to find out more on our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. If you're looking to reach me personally, my Facebook page is Daren C. Jaime. And then you can catch me on Instagram and Twitter at DCJaime23. There you might be able to find some information as well as some inspiration as well. Well, coming up on today's show, we go front and center talking about religious freedom in America. My guest served for 8 years as U.S. Department of Homeland Security as Deputy Director, the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. She's a minister, strategist, planner, advisor, author, and also a public policy expert. She served in many capacities with faith, government, business, as well as the not-for-profit community. And currently, she's the executive director of the American Center for Religious Freedom, and she joins us now to discuss a topic that's near and dear to my heart. We're pleased to welcome Dr. Jannah Scott with us. And Dr. Scott, good to see you.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Well, let's get right into it. I mean, when we talk about religious freedom in America, we know that a lot is at stake. We've seen the state where prayer has been taken out of school. We see that there's a lot of action happening politically. How would you describe the state of religious freedom in America?
I think America as a whole goes through these pendulum type processes where at one point the pendulum has swung to one direction, and then at another point it has swung to the opposite direction. I think right now we are at that point where the pendulum has been at the extreme of one direction, and there is a tension before it actually changes direction. I believe that religious freedom is going to be more and more recognized for what it truly is in our Constitution, both that the nation would not establish any particular religion, but also that individuals would not be prohibited from the free expression thereof. So I think we're at that tipping point right now.
How do you describe religious freedom? Because when we talk about it, we in America say one nation under God.
Religious freedom is described, in my view, as the ability to practice that faith that you ascribe to without being hindered in any way. And that in any way is of critical importance. And I think we saw that in so many examples in the last couple of years where some people felt like wearing a mask or taking the COVID vaccine was a hindrance to their religious freedom. And so we have to acknowledge that in a country where you have that embedded in the Constitution, whether we agree with that or not, that is the way that religious freedom manifests in our nation.
And when we look right now, we know that there are several on, we can say both sides of the aisle, right, who really are questioning religious freedom and have put laws in place that could possibly or trying to put laws in place that would take things back. Talk to me about the political climate that you're working in, and how do you really manage and navigate, given the fact that you know that religious freedom is supposed to exist, but there's so many who still want to take that away?
The political environment that I worked in, I'm no longer in the political administration, but when I was with the Obama administration for 8 years, I must say that President Obama at the time was a strong proponent of religious freedom. And you could see that in the way that every time he spoke, he talked about no matter what you believe, your faith tradition, and even no belief at all. And he even utilized opportunities to practice or to show forth that manifestation by having different types of religious celebrations and accommodations in the White House. And then in the agencies, we had a great opportunity to work on policies that would ensure religious freedom. One prime example was working out of Homeland Security. There were many policies that had to be developed in terms of what you could and could not fly safely with. Think about someone out of the Sikh community whose religious freedom says to them they have the right to carry their ceremonial sword. But in the sake of going on an airplane in a time when everyone's concerned about attacks on airplanes, we had to juggle that, the Religious Freedom Reformation Act, with the desire for someone to carry their ceremonial sword, which could be a weapon in the hands of someone who had bad intentions, on a plane. And so we worked with the community, talked with the community, helped to develop a possibility where people could actually wrap their swords very securely and could still have them transported on a plane without disturbing anybody's concern about aviation safety, but yet also maintaining their right to express their religion in the way that they do. We did have some situations that had to be addressed here in Phoenix, Arizona, where I am right now. We had 6 or 7 imams who were arrested at a local airport because they decided to pray before they got on a plane. Now think about that. You know, as a woman of God and you as a man of God, maybe many listeners here who are people of God, how many times have you prayed before you got on a plane, or while you were on the plane before it took off? So it's an expression of our religious freedom if we want to pray before we get onto an airplane to travel. But these men were arrested for doing that because of the misunderstanding of their faith. And so there was quite a bit of conversation and policy work around ensuring that airports would not accost Muslims who wanted to pray before they took their plane. As a matter of fact, they were given a special place in airports to pray. So these are 2 examples that we worked with, and there were many others, both on the Christian side as well as the non-Christian side that we worked on. So I would say that during that administration, religious freedom across the board was the order of the day, regardless of your religion, and even if you had no religion at all.
Would you say that during your time in the Obama administration, that probably was at one of the heights of really religious freedom, when we saw what was going on with the Muslim community? We saw a lot of hate crimes attacking churches. We know about the church in Charleston, the AME church massacre. I think that probably things became a little bit more emboldened during your season of working there.
Burned churches and churches under attack were something that had been going on for quite some time. The U.S. Department of Justice would report those as hate crimes, but you are exactly right. During the years from 2009 to 2016, crimes against religious institutions increased to the point that in Homeland Security, I was appointed along with some other people to work with the White House on a guide for houses of worship on how to prepare high quality emergency operations plans. One piece of that was our work with the FBI to include in that guide a piece on what to do to prepare for, respond to, recover from even an active shooter incident. So you're absolutely right. hate crimes against religious institutions did increase at that time. And we did what we could from a policy perspective. I think the president at that time did what he could from his pulpit, so to speak, his perch as the leader of the free world, to speak about these issues publicly and to seek to support those institutions, whether it was the Mother Emanuel AME church shooting, or whether it was the shooting in Tucson, or whether it was any of the active shooter incidents, even the school incident at Sandy Hook, as well as churches that were burned. He did all that he could to support them publicly. And I do want to mention that in Homeland Security, when we first came in under President Obama, the secretary was Janet Napolitano, former governor of Arizona. And one of the first things she did, and I was privileged to work with her on this, was to establish a faith-based advisory committee to ensure that faith leaders from all different faith traditions had a direct voice into the Secretary of Homeland Security and through her to the president on issues of concern.
I want to talk to you for a quick second, but I'm going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more because we want to continue our conversation, but I'm going to take a quick break, talking more with Dr. Jannah Scott, talking about religious freedom here in America when we return right here on Perspectives. And we're back here on Perspectives. Daren Jaime here with you, and we're continuing our conversation with Dr. Jannah Scott, who's been talking to us about religious freedom in America, the work that she's doing. And Dr. Scott, for somebody who doesn't know about the work that you're doing right now, share with us a little bit about it.
The American Center for Religious Freedom is actually looking at religious freedom issues around the world. And so we are actually working alongside several colleagues in other countries, including Azerbaijan, Qatar. We are trying to make relations with a few other countries, but we've had relations with countries mostly in the Far East, the Near East, and the Middle East, who are seeing religious persecution of Christians, Uyghur Muslims, and even in some parts other religious groups. Our idea is that to identify an issue, to get people to begin to really honestly dialogue about it, will lead us to solutions if we can really come heart to heart. We believe in the power of reconciliation, particularly with these younger generations coming up. Many wars have been started over religion, we know that, but we believe the young people have a way to bring us out of that. So we're really trying to raise up young people to think about religious freedom as an important part of their life, whether they're in the US or whether they're in other countries.
Walk us through this, because when we talk about the United States, we talk about these incidents that happen. You see hate crimes, and we talked about synagogues, we talked about mosques, we talked about Christian churches. We see this, and while they are more frequent, they're few and far between. But when you look about what's going on in the world, and you've mentioned some places, religious persecution in other parts of the world are happening on a daily basis. So can you give us a little bit of a take of some of the persecution that's happening around the world that maybe we're not so familiar with?
I think the two that I would mention are India against Sikh and Muslim communities, and to an extent Christians, and also, of course, China with the Uyghur Muslims, where many of them have been interred in these kind of camps in China. And it's really difficult to put our minds around that as Americans, that we would be locked in akin to a concentration camp because of what we believe. And I think in India, and I do have some Christian colleagues actually who are doing underground churches over there. Some of it is political, but I think a lot of it has to do with the concern that if people convert to a religion other than the state religion, which in the case of India is primarily Hindu, that there could be a shift in political power. Now, I want to say this, though, that the practice of Hinduism has nothing to do with the political leveraging of a religion for the sake of power. So even though a nation like India is known to persecute Christians and Muslims, that does not negate or speak against the religion of Hinduism, and particularly its practice here in the United States.
Yeah. And when we look at the United States, we say we're the home of the free, and we're supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. But when we look at religious freedom, we do know that it's sharply under attack. What can we do as a community to really deal with raising our voice or being more active in the area of promoting religious freedom?
I may have a different perspective than some speakers about this, but I truly believe this is a matter of the heart. Whenever we try to put up one religion against another or against no religion, or whenever we try to prohibit someone from speaking against a religion because it's our religion, but yet we speak against others, we're asking for a problem. And the biggest problem we get is division. And so from my perspective, it's more about expressing the love that your religion tells you to express, and to reach out to people with that love, as opposed to trying to beat people down because they don't believe like you do.
Yeah. Well, I think about it, and I think about recent statistics that were out, and there is a conversation that's out that says in America, more people are now affiliating themselves as being spiritual more than actually being religious. That people are departing religion, if you will, for the sake of spirituality. And in some circles, there's a belief that because people are leaving religion, quote unquote, and becoming more spiritual, that it's kind of like up the ante against religion.
Well, as a follower of Jesus, I want to say that my faith has never been about religion. It's been about relationship. And if you think about the cross upon which Christ gave his life for the remission of our sins, that stake that was put into the ground truly represents our relationship with God. And that stake that he hung on, his arms stretched wide to the point that he could not breathe as he hung there, that represents our relationship with one another. So when we begin to make it too religious, that's what begins to turn people away. The core of what my faith teaches is the relationship that we have with God and one another. And I think that's sometimes where we end up with these problems, is that we want to build our own mindset and our own institutions around something called religion, instead of focusing on the relationship one with another, and that relationship grounded in that love that Jesus talked about.
So where do we go from here when we talk about religious freedom? A lot is on the table, a lot to deal with. But from your perspective, where do we go from here?
At the beginning, I said the pendulum is at that tension point,
Right.
and it's about to swing from one direction to another. We really have not, I don't think, in the past thought about people saying, I'm going to pray publicly at school. Prayer never was truly outlawed in schools because people cannot stop people from praying. But public prayer was a concern of many people. But now, with the recent Supreme Court decision of the football coach, we have now that freedom for public prayer, even in schools. Even though I'm sure that there's a lot of people that are upset about that, the Supreme Court has spoken on that. And so I believe that in this time of tension, as the pendulum has swung and it's about to begin to swing back, we as people, particularly those who hold fast to the faith of Jesus Christ, we must not use that time of tension as a time to battle, but instead to love people into an understanding of what our faith is truly about. And I expect that every religion would take the same stance.
Yeah. I want to take a moment and talk about your book. You've got a recent book out there that I think is worth talking about. So let's talk about it and let's let our viewers know.
The book is entitled Standing on the Wall, Prayers to Preserve the Integrity of a Nation. When you think about the integrity of something, that's what's holding it together. And what is holding our nation together? You said it earlier, one nation under God. Whether or not I as an individual ascribe to that spiritual power that we know, those of us who are followers of Christ know is in our Lord and Savior who sits at the right hand of the Father, whether or not anybody accepts that, we know that this nation was founded on theological biblical principles. Some will say, oh, well, Ben Franklin was a deist, but still, day is Latin for God. So you got to understand that this nation was established as one nation under God. And so to that extent, this book was written to really ask people to pray for the integrity of this nation to be established. That understanding that we are a nation established under God, and we even have it on our money, for gosh sakes. And we need to act like that, one toward another. If we truly believe that in God we trust, then we've got to act like that. And we've got to live out the principles that we're taught in our sacred scriptures instead of being so divisive one with another. So this book is a book of prayers. It's a book of declarations, and it's available on Amazon.com, but it's also available on the White House Prayer Initiative website. I'm so honored to be in partnership with Dr. Terry and Dr. Joyce Lee of the White House Prayer Initiative. Every year for the last 24 years, we've gone to the ellipse of the White House and prayed for the president, regardless of who was in office, and every aspect of government. And so they've honored me by placing my book on their website as well, whitehouseprayer.org or Amazon.com.
You've worked at the highest form of government, working with the White House, working at Homeland Security, really helping to shape policy that what goes on across America. As you reflect back on life, career, what do you want people to take away from your work?
That God is faithful. I never planned for this, but God in his omniscience guided every step of my life, even through some very difficult tasks and tracks, to where he placed me to be in one of the offices of the highest form of this nation's government. And I'm so grateful for the faithfulness of God. And I would want to say to anyone who is walking through a time of difficulty right now, to know that if you just reach out and hold on to the hand of God, he will bring you through. That obedience and that sacrifice to him, particularly that obedience to walking in the way that he has called us to walk, will take you to the highest heights. If you humble yourself before the mighty hand of God, he will exalt you in due time. So I want people to remember that of anything else.
Do you feel as though in the midst of all of this chaos that's going on that you do see some light at the end of the tunnel?
I am the perennial optimist. I just continue to have hope in the integrity of this nation being preserved. And it may be that the generations to come will be the ones to bring it back. It may be that we can plant seeds today that may not bear fruit until 10, 20, 30 years from now, but we've got to start planting the seeds now. We've got to start planting the seeds. And so you think about that seed that develops over decades into an oak tree. When you first plant the seed of that oak tree, you would never think that such a mighty, beautiful manifestation of God's creation could come out of that. And so we, as people on the planet right now, particularly of my generation and the generation after me, let's begin to plant those seeds of hope that the generations to come will preserve the integrity of this nation and will bring us back to God's original intent for us.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Jannah Scott, for being with us. I mean, it's been a great conversation. We can do this for hours, and I love to have you back to talk about the work and see how we're progressing and what we need to be paying attention to. It's been an honor and a privilege to have you here on Perspectives, and I thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. What a privilege for me. God bless you, and thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jannah Scott, our guest here, and I want to let you know that you've been watching Perspectives, talking about religious freedom in America. Of course, while Roe v. Wade is the topic of conversation, what has not gotten a whole lot of press is that prayer is actually allowed in schools. And that's a major decision. How it will play out, of course, we'll continue to see, but we'll see also whether or not it will play out. Because there's some people who say no matter what the Supreme Court decides, we're still not going to do it. But our course, of course, is to just continue to keep fighting to make sure that there is freedom and liberty and justice for all, particularly in the area of religion. I'm Daren Jaime saying thank you, God bless, and you've been watching Perspectives. Be sure to check us out every week here on Bronx's Channel 67. Again, if you want to reach me on the social media platforms, DC Jaime 23. On Instagram and also Twitter, and then my professional page, Daren C. Jaime. For all of us here, my producer, Curlew Burton, and myself, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, share your perspective with somebody else. You just don't know. It might make a difference in somebody else's life.